So it's individualised for each child, but each child comes in every morning and they have their own allocated space, nice quiet room. They might have some therapy for 5 minutes just to calm and regulate. And each child has a folder, and it has basically, my name is Hunter. I go to St. Patrick's School. I'm in year 1. And it's actually unpacking the day. I'll start my day in the hub. I'll do some therapy. When it's time to go, the teacher will tell me to wait, and then she'll say go, and I'll walk the safe way to the classroom. So that's a skill that he has worked on in the hub with the support of video modelling. So on how to walk independently from the hub to his classroom, so that he doesn't need to hold his aide's hand. He can do that on his own.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Well, welcome everybody. I am super excited to have Renee with us, a mum of a beautiful autistic boy and a primary school principal, so she wears a couple of hats. Renee's going to talk to us about using video modelling, and plus, if we get time, some other exciting things that she's doing. So welcome, Renee.
Oh, thank you, Sue. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, I am thrilled. So Renee and I were actually having a phone conversation about some other things, and she started telling me about how she was using video modelling. And I said, can you come on the podcast and share? Because I've used video modelling for a long time, but I think hearing how you use it would be really, really helpful. So can you tell us a little bit about how you use it?
Well, look, we use video modelling. I use it at home for my son Hunter, and I've also seen the benefits of it at school as well. So Hunter, he is, as you said, a beautiful little autistic boy, but not a lot of the world makes sense to Hunter, and he also has ADHD, so he's very difficult to lock down to actually talk about anything or go through a social story. So I found the power in delivering a social story through video modelling to be really, really powerful. And I think the power of the narration in the video is something that I'm really discovering is just another layer in terms of helping him in using those videos. So when we had our conversation, Sue, I talked about Hunter had a Playdate with one of his friends, and I think that's really probably a good example of how powerful the video modelling was. Hunter had never had a play date before, so he was in kindergarten last year and he had his first play date with one of his little friends. And when his friend arrived at the door, I thought I'll just observe and see what's going on. And Hunter was just wandering around and his little friend was following him, and she said, oh, he likes to play the following game. But I could see that he was actually just trying to get away, trying to get his own space, and I could tell he was uncomfortable. And then he was sort of falling down a lot, and his little friend said, oh, he does that a lot at school. He falls over and it's funny, and she thought it was a joke, but he was actually not joking. He was finding that interaction so difficult. So I got out the video, the phone, and started videoing the interaction. And as I was videoing the interaction, I was using narration. So I was actually explaining to Hunter what was happening. So I was saying, Hunter and his friend are eating lunch. Hunter is having a Vegemite sandwich. His friend is having Cheezels. They're having a great time. So being really specific about what was happening. We then played hide and seek. So even though Hunter wasn't engaging in the game, I still narrated the game and used the phone as if I was Hunter and explaining what was happening. Oh, we're going to find your friend. They're hiding. Let's go. Oh, they're behind the door. Oh, that scared me. So to sort of help him see, exactly what was happening, because I could tell from the get-go he was so confused about what to do in that situation. And his little friend was confused as well.
Yeah.
she really didn't understand how to communicate with him, and she obviously didn't understand that he was actually quite uncomfortable. So as the play date went on, and I did a series of little videos, and I was the voiceover for the play date, you could just see him relaxing and see him starting to engage in the games. And at the start of the play date, I was really sad for him, because I could see how much he was struggling. But in doing the videoing and narrating the experience for him, I could see that anxiety coming down, and he actually had a successful, a semi-successful play date. Now, when his friend left, I always upload his videos straight to YouTube on the liked videos, so he can watch them. And as soon as she left, he started watching the videos back. And he spent, I think she left around lunchtime, he spent the rest of that day just watching those videos back. And we had a lot of issues with Hunter last year, having massive meltdowns, either at the end of the day, after school. And he'd watch these videos all day. And I remember that night vividly, because he got into the shower without a meltdown. He got dressed without any fights. He went to bed, no problem. He was actually more regulated than I'd ever seen him. And I thought, he actually felt good about that play date, and the videos helped him unpack and understand what had happened. So I think that, I was excited to tell you that story, because I saw an immediate impact of Hunter experiencing that, me supporting him through it, but then having the videos to then return to. And it had an immediate impact, I think, on his oxytocin levels, just feeling good about something and thinking, oh, I actually know what went on there, and I wasn't confused.
Yeah, 100%. And that's my experience. And my experience is exactly what you're talking about. He got to process it in his own time. So he could rewatch it over and over, get an idea of what happened, your voiceover explaining the different things that were happening. And you were, sometimes as a teacher, I'm guessing how a child's feeling, like, Hunter's happy eating his sandwich or whatever. But I think sometimes my children, because they overthink things, that when they're watching the video, they can nearly go, yeah, I was happy. But in the moment, they're often so caught up in everything else that's going on, and playing things like hide and seek, when you're actually behind the camera talking that through, you're just giving him nearly the words and understanding to match his experience. And so a lot of young adults tell me that the reason they do have those meltdowns at the end of the day is they're going back over everything and unpacking it. It sounds like that gave him the scaffolding to unpack it.
Yes. Yeah, certainly. And, we see in the school environment the power of, obviously, the video modelling, but the power that we're really harnessing now with that, with people being the voiceover, and people being the narrator. And I remember a little fellow starting kindergarten, and it was pickup time, and he was getting really agitated at pickup time, and the teachers were like, oh, this is really bothering him. And I remember going and sitting next to him, and I was explaining to him and saying, all of the kids will wait right here. See the parents, they'll come in one at a time and see the kids. When they see their mum, they will go to their mum, and then they'll go home. All of the kids will wait until they see their mum, and you will wait until you see your mum. And then at the end of that pickup, that pickup afternoon, the teacher came and said, what did you do? What did you do? Because I've never seen that child that regulated and settled. And I said, I explained to him what was happening. Yeah. I often think, if we were in a foreign country, we'd be asking, we'd be really keen for people to explain to us, well, what does that mean and what's happening there? I think that's what it's like for lots of our kids on the spectrum. It's like they're in a foreign country and they don't actually know sometimes what's going on, and the power of somebody being able to unpack. And I see that at home, but I see the things that Hunter has taught me at home that I'm able to now apply with my staff at school is, the power is phenomenal.
Unbelievable. I love it. And if we think about it, that's all to do with mind blindness. So other children can predict what's happening and that we're sitting waiting for our parents. We just assume children understand that. And for children on the spectrum, that's a big assumption that they know why they're sitting there and what's going on. Well, people go, surely they can see the other parents picking up their children and them going, that's a big assumption. Because for this child, they don't necessarily connect the dots in the same way. And so then imagine you don't understand, then your anxiety rises, doesn't it? So if you don't understand what's happening, then you're going to get more and more anxious and you're going to act out. And then all because no one explained what was going on. So exactly like it is like being in a foreign country too, because many of my children can't process. It's not just the words, it's the gesture and movement of everyone else, of what's going on. So they mightn't understand the sequence of what's happening. So I love that example of pickup. And I've used video modeling for that myself. Actually, back in the day, we used to have video cameras, not our phones, which is so convenient. But one of the ones I've always done is like if a child needs to go to the dentist, getting the parent to go the week before and actually videoing sitting waiting at the dentist, and then the receptionist will tell you when to come, and then videoing the parent going back in the chair, putting on the sunglasses. So the child gets to see the parent and what's like commentating, like you're saying. I think the commentating is really important. The dentist's going to check your teeth. The dentist's going to do this. The dentist's asking you to rinse your mouth out because then they can check, the dentist is going to put on fluoride. And then the child's we're not assuming they understand what's happening. We're adding the commentary to help them understand what's happening. So.
Absolutely. And I think, the power of being able to watch those videos back. And, we talk about, at school we have our support team is set up. We have a thing called the Hub, where lots of our high needs kids, they come to the Hub before they go to their class, and they have their roadmaps for the day. So there's they'll come in and they'll open their folder with their roadmap for the day, and all of the breaks and what I'll be doing, and the power of that, but also the power of that repetitiveness that we use in the video modelling, obviously, and in those roadmap social stories that we have for our kids. It's that the power of building that inner monologue and that self-talk, and that's something I'm really noticing with Hunter, that you can hear him using the language from the video when he's then navigating that situation on his own. And I think that's the ultimate goal, isn't it, to really have that inner monologue and that self-talk building up. But, it's a skill that needs to be modelled and taught.
Yeah, and we're using two of their people on the spectrum strengths. One is repetition, the love of repetition. And I think we forget that most autistic children love doing the same thing over and over again. So we should harness that passion for repetition. So like you're saying, the kids coming in, having that same roadmap every morning, or watching a video over and over and over. And my experience with a schedule or any of those things, that as the child uses it more, the less they have to look at it, because then they know what to expect. And the same with the video modelling. The dentist one, we might have looked at them every day or whatever, building up to the dentist. And then actually after, sometimes the children want to rewatch them, but then we mightn't look at that again for 6 months, but then you go back to it. So it's like I always say, when you're tired or had a hard day, my guess is you go back to a show, not something new. So for many of our children, they love the repetition of something they already know, but adding the visual, because we know their visual processes, plus the repetition. It's like a perfect marriage, really, that they're marrying those two together. So I know people listening want to know, so what is the roadmap that they have for the day? What does that look like?
So it's individualized for each child, but each child comes in every morning and they have their own allocated space, nice quiet room. They might have some therapy for 5 minutes just to calm and regulate. And each child has a folder, and it has basically, you know, my name is Hunter. I go to St. Patrick's School. I'm in year 1. You know, and it actually unpacking the day. I'll start my day in the hub. I'll do some therapy. When it's time to go, the teacher will tell me to wait, and then she'll say go, and I'll walk the safe way to the classroom. So that's a skill that he has worked on in the hub with the supported video modelling. So on how to walk independently from the hub to his classroom, so that he doesn't need to hold his aide's hand. He can do that on his own. You know, it talks about how when he gets to the classroom, the teacher will help him. It talks about when his planned breaks are, when recess is, and we also like to actually be really specific with the kids about, well, what do we do in the classroom? How do we listen? What does it look like to listen? And what you know, just unpacking, well, what is the day? And we found such success with that. I know you talk about, you know, being the GPS, but one of our girls who started last year, we introduced her to the hub, and she said, oh, this is so good. She said, I need a roadmap. And we'd never actually called it a roadmap before, but we now do, because, you know, it's the perfect thing. And we've found with our highest needs kids, you know, before we introduce this type of program, you know, they'd have their aid, and, you know, but the wheels might fall off if the aid's away, or, you know, if there's a change in the routine, and they were really sort of, or if there's a casual teacher. We're finding that's those kinds of things are becoming less and less, because the child relies on the roadmap and not the people.
I love
Do you
that.
know what I
mean? 100%. Yeah. And I always say it's all about, so many people try and fade the prompts. It's not about fading the prompts. It's about building the independence. So at first, someone might be opening the folder of the roadmap for them and helping them pick up the therapy. My aim is they come in, open their folder, do the therapy themselves. So we're not taking away the structure of the roadmap. It's just they're accessing it independently. And, you know, that walking to the classroom, at first you might have to prompt them and remind them how to walk, and, you know, might have to hold their aid. But ultimately, we want them walking independently between classrooms and having because that's all about anxiety. If you're calm, then you can do that. And if you know what's required. So I love that. We're adding my GPS and your roadmap. It's fantastic. Right.
And, you know, an example with Hunter, you know, he has his roadmap, but I will video, even though it's a visual, you know, it's on paper, it's a visual story, but I will read the story and I'll be videoing the actual story and doing the voiceover, because he's not one to, you know, at home sit down and listen to a story. He will at school, but not so much at home. But that's really important too, for him to be able to listen back to that, and you can hear him actually verbalizing things from the story. And one of the components of his daily roadmap is I will see mummy at school, because he comes to my school. And we were a bit worried about that, because as we know, you know, when kids see their safest person, they can sometimes go to bits if they're a bit anxious, and we were a little bit worried about that. But his roadmap includes a story about me. So I might see mummy at school. So when I see mummy, I will wave to mummy. Mummy will wave back, and she will go back to do her work, and Hunter will go back to do his work, and then I'll see mummy after school. So if he sees me, he will say, mummy's doing her work, and I'll see mummy after school. So you can just, you know, that the video has the daily roadmap provides him with that self-talk, but the being able to have that in video modelling as well is extra powerful.
Absolutely. But you've done the perfect social script there, because you've told him what his action's going to be when he sees you. You've given him like to wave, you know, and this is the problem I have with a lot of social scripts, that people say no hitting instead of, if you want something, you need to ask for it. This is how you ask, you know, Renee, can I have a turn? And it's like, you actually have to, well, when you see mummy, you're going to wave to mummy. Yeah. Mummy's going to wave back. Mummy's going to go and do her work. You're going to go and do. So everyone's clear who's doing what's happening, you know. So, you know, I had a little girl once who used to get anxious lining up. And what it turned out, it was all the noise and movement, which makes sense, doesn't it? Lining up is very sensory overwhelming. But when we were able to tell her, if someone bumps into you, you can stand to the side and say, oh, you bumped me. Or, if someone pushes in, you can say, excuse me, I was here first, and gave her the language, because what she used to do is start hitting people. But what we needed to do was tell her what to do in each scenario, And our last one was, if you're really worried, you can go and stand next to the teacher. But what we had done is pretty much that commentary you're doing. We're explaining, well, when you're in the line, here are all the things that can happen. The other way I use video modeling, which I think is really handy, is for things like assemblies. And because often we assume the children know why they're going to the hall, but one time they go to the hall and they're allowed to run around. And then the next time they go and they're meant to sit still, like it can be a very confusing place. And so, commentating it when we go and when we're going to sing the national anthem. And because so often children just go to the hall and there's no visuals. It doesn't show them the roadmap, as you'd call it. Or it's, what is happening when I get to that hall? Am I doing phys ed? Am I having an incursion? If there's spaces where children are confused, I think that's where video modeling can really help them understand what's happening.
Definitely. And we're even finding, my AP and I run a whole school assembly every Monday, and we're finding the power of actually using that narration with the whole school. When the kids are coming in and we expect them to come into the hall quietly, we'll say, I can see the children, they're coming in and they're walking in quietly and they're sitting at their seats, narrating for the whole school so that every single child has that orientation to the modelling of the appropriate behaviour.
I love that. In fact, I had forgotten all about this. It's in my early years book, which I haven't looked at for ages. And it's about, because often in early years, there'll be like children in the sandpit, people on the slide. There'll be a lot of kids everywhere. And I had a few students for a while that this worked really well, where we'd stand at the door, because a lot of them couldn't scan. They'd just see the water play and go straight to it and not notice someone else was already at the water play. Mm-hmm. So we called it the stop and scan. And basically we'd stop and we'd narrate what everyone's doing. Like, Elijah's on the slide, Joshua's on the swing, Renee's at the water play, and we'd point out the children, because what we noticed, many of our children were seeing the objects but not who was already playing with it. So then they'd just go and grab it, not knowing that someone already had that toy. Because, when children in the sandpit, often they put things to the side, or they mightn't be have their hand on the truck, but it's part of their game. Does that mean,
Yes.
And so we did this commentating, which is fantastic. And it was amazing, the response, like how fast children just suddenly realised, oh, there is all these 30 other children doing these things. But then one of my little boys who loved car racing started commentating everyone moving, and it was cute to see. People like, here comes Sue, she's moving towards the door, and he started. But it just shows that some of our children actually are thinking like that.
Yeah, and it's lovely. We've noticed that some of the kids have actually picked up on our modelling with Hunter at school, and they're actually using narration when they play with him. Sophia's going to pass Hunter the ball. Hunter caught the ball. Well done, Hunter. And that's phenomenal to see the other kids picking that up and being able to communicate with him in the way that he communicates. Because it's such hard work for him, because he speaks because his communication is so different. I mean, he talks in scripts. He talks like he's narrating a story. One of our girls in the hub the other day said, why does he talk like he's narrating a movie? And I said, but that's how he actually talks. He talks like, I said, you're right. He talks like he's talking in a script, but that's how he communicates, and that's just Hunter. And she understood then that's just how he talks and how he communicates with others.
Yeah, and I love that. I think that's what children, it's no different to teaching children signing if you've got a hearing impaired child in your class, that the children do accommodate and adapt if we explain, like, this is Hunter's way of communicating. And my experience is they love it. Like they say, oh, this is fun,
Well, I think it helps them too, because, there are lots of kids who go through the day probably a bit confused about a lot of things, and, explaining that to the whole group could probably benefit, lots of the kids.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and we're finding that, as I said, with our, even with our whole school assemblies, we're finding the impact of, being very explicit about what's happening around the kids is really beneficial to everyone.
Yeah, fantastic. Have you used video modelling at all to teach skills like toothbrushing or getting dressed, or not so much with those things?
Not so much with Hunter at home. More to teach routines, heavily with the school stuff, and with the social stuff more so. But I think that's certainly a space where it's useful as well. With Hunter, we find if we find a clip of someone doing something, it's powerful if it's him, but also if it's someone else, it can be just as powerful. And he had a dentist visit not long ago, and he hates the dentist completely. Like, we've never had any success at the dentist, and we stumbled across the Mr. Bean at the dentist, and he went to the dentist because he'd been watching Mr. Bean sit in the chair and, Mr. Bean getting the thing in his mouth. He actually had the best success at the dentist that he's ever had, even though that was a comical clip. He was able to, we were saying, oh, Hunter's going to go to the dentist like Mr. Bean.
Yeah, I love it. In fact, I had a class of 8 to 10-year-olds who were non-verbal at a specialist school, and Mr. Bean was their favourite show. I think it's that, all the kids have a sense of humour, but I think Mr. Bean really can appeal to some of our kids, and we shouldn't underestimate showing them comedy and that sort of.
And I think because there's not a lot of language with Mr. Bean, and Hunter has quite a significant sort of startle reflex. So any loud noises or even a change in the tone of my voice can actually frighten him, and he'll say, "Oh, that scared me." So I know the clip with Mr. Bean at the pool where he's very scared to jump off the diving board. Hunter actually narrates that, oh, Mr. Bean is feeling really scared. Look, oh, he doesn't want to jump off. And he is actually able to unpack that, which is really helpful as well.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Oh, so many things we could talk about. But anyway, I'm hoping it's inspired people to have a go at doing some video modelling. And the way I'd say it is there's no wrong or right way. Just give it a go. Like, some children like to commentate themselves. Some like you to commentate. My experience is they do like them of themselves and people they know. I mean, I've used them. I had a boy in year 5 who was struggling in the playground at basketball because he played on the weekend with a referee, and that was a different game in the playground to what he played with a referee on the weekend. As you know, at your school, if kids are playing basketball, there is no out of bounds, there is no foul, none of those rules apply. But he didn't understand it was a different game. So we videoed his schoolyard and how the children were playing. And then we were able to play it back and get him to look and say to me, that's out of bounds. I said, not at school, the rules are different. So we were able to unpack, because he was getting really aggressive because people were breaking the rules. But by videoing the children he knew in that playground, he was able to that processing. And then we also got the students to do what you just talked about with Hunter, where they would, instead of, they sort of throw the ball to anyone. They had to say Daniel's name before they threw it to him. Yes. And no one else was the other students were incredibly supportive. But instead of everyone yelling, throw it to me, that if it was going to Daniel, everyone else went quiet so he could process it. And actually, I think this is where we underestimate how supportive the kids were. They all got it. They loved the fact that, he had some strategies. They wanted to include him. They just didn't know why he was getting so angry with them all the time, And
I think that's something that we sort of talked about in our last conversation was about, well, how do we build that understanding more, and how do we give the other kids insight into what it's like for a child on the spectrum, and how can they engage in a way that that everybody understands.
Yeah, and that's a really good segue into the lesson plans you sent to me. So the reason Renee and I were originally talking is she had some lesson plans on talking to children to help them understand autism. Is that a good way to describe what the lesson?
Yeah.
I'll put them with the podcast and the blog. Renee said I can put them there because we would love some people to try them, because Renee's and I both looked at them and they look great. But I think the next step is people actually giving the lesson plans a go. But do you want to just quickly explain how you visualize it, or visualize how you imagine it?
I had this in mind, for the time when we do diagnosis disclosure to Hunter's peers. And so that's always something in the back of our minds and, really important to us in terms of building that understanding. And the more the kids understand, the easier it is going to be for Hunter. So I looked around and looked at the resources, and I thought, I think I could probably write a little book about Hunter. And I ended up writing a little poem about Hunter. And I thought, would the kids understand this? And then I thought, well, before we present the poem, I think the kids would need a fair bit of pre-teaching. So pre-teaching about, well, what is sensory input? What is the brain? What does the brain do? How does the brain process information? So from that, in terms of listing all of the things that I felt kids would need to know before they could get to the point of understanding, well, what is autism? That's where the two lessons that precede the poem sort of grew out of.
Yeah, I love it. And you're using like the idea of a traffic jam, aren't you? Which is for children to understand. And I think that's lovely. It's sort of for younger children, sort of using something they can understand, like traffic, and as the analogy for the brain as the sensory input. And then when your brain gets jammed up, then how hard it is to actually understand.
Yeah, and I sort of talk about in the lesson how, when our brains process sensory information smoothly, it's like all the cars going through a toll booth, and they're all going through and it's organised and they're sent off on their way. But when people do struggle with sensory processing, it becomes like a traffic jam. And I think the importance of the lessons too, in terms of getting people to understand that jam can actually result in physical pain. And I know it does with Hunter. He talks about that hit me in the chest when he gets anxious or he gets scared. He feels a physical jolt in his chest. So I think sometimes people think, oh, they just don't like light, or they just don't like loud noises. It's not that they don't like it. It's actually, it can get to the point where it's actually physically painful, and that the anxiety that can come from that can be debilitating. So I think that's a really important insight for everyone to realise and have a bit more understanding about, well, if you were in physical pain every time, the light flickered, or, you heard the fan, or, there was a sudden noise, how would you be coping with your day?
100%. And this is why I always say these kids are the bravest kids I teach, because to even turn up, like if you thought I could go into that room and experience pain from that flickering light, would you really do that? No. I wouldn't. I'd be under my doona going, I'm not going in that room. It's like when I often say to people, like, you see a hand dryer, to that child, it's like there's a massive huntsman on the wall. Like, would you go into the toilet if there was a big huntsman? No way. But our autistic children do. They're so brave. And no wonder, kids like Hunter get home and have to unpack it all, because all day they've had all this anxiety being thrown, anxiety events, sensory, social, communication. And no wonder when they get home, they don't want to have a shower.
That's right. And I remember one of my students, he would say, oh, the classroom's too noisy. Inevitably, if there was an incident, the classroom's too noisy. And, the teachers would often say, well, it's not noisy in my room. And you try to explain to the teachers that it might not be noisy for you, but that noise at that particular point of his dysregulation was actually causing pain. And I said to him, what does it feel like when the classroom's too noisy? And he said, it's like someone's driving a knife into my eardrum. So it's not just that they don't like noise, it's that at that point of sensory overload, they're in pain often.
100%. Because also the higher anxiety, the higher your sensory sensitivity. So it all builds on each other. So if you've been startled, then you're more anxious. So even if the noise before the startle was just a little noise, now it sort of becomes so much more amplified. And I often tell the story of one of my students, Finn, that maths was his favourite subject. So he was hyper-focused. And sometimes when our students are hyper-focused, you're going to get more of a startle too. So he was hyper-focused on his maths exam, and someone was just tapping a pen lightly on the table and he just flipped his whole desk. But to him, he said it was like a jackhammer in his head, like, so imagine that. Everyone else looking on, it's like, it's just a pen tapping. No, because he's hyper-focused, he's not blocking that out. And then, boom, it feels like a migraine. Or to me, that's when he said a jackhammer. I thought, that sounds like a migraine to me. Imagine that. I'd flip my desk too,
Absolutely. And, I always say to my teachers, and we really focus on this at our school, that we need to look beyond the behaviour and we need to understand what's going on behind it. And I think that's, that's one of our main focus goals in terms of the professional development that I'm delivering to the staff, that I will be delivering to my staff this year. It's around that understanding, well, what is going on, not just on the surface, but what is going on physically for our kids on the spectrum, because it's not always pleasant.
No, I couldn't agree more. Now, I don't know, if we run out of time, can you read like maybe the first little bit of the poem? Because I do love it. Am I putting you on the spot? I don't mind if we can't.
Yeah, I should have it. I should have a copy of it in front of me, shouldn't I? Let me just find it. And as you know, my computer hasn't been very cooperative.
I had to get Renee to turn off everything because it was lagging with the Zoom. So it's all good. But can you find it?
I will find it.
Hold on, dear.
Okay,
Renee, let's hear it.
Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, so I'll just read a couple of snippets because it is a bit long, and it's called An Amazing Brain. Everybody has a brain deep inside their head. A brain keeps you alive and is working even when you are in bed. It helps you understand the world. It helps you listen and speak. It helps you sort the things you see and feel and smell each week. Now, every brain is different. They don't all work the same. Some brains are good at sorting out light, sounds, smells and names, but some brains can get flooded with all the things that come their way. And when that happens, a person can feel a lot of pain. I'll jump down a bit further. Autism is a special word we use when a brain is different. An autistic person might find everyday things difficult. They might find it hard to talk or sit in a crowd. They might find the tiniest sounds very harsh and loud. An autistic person might not like it when the lights are bright because the light might hurt their eyes or even affect their sight. They might not like certain foods and they can seem quite fussy, but that's because some foods can actually make them feel very yucky.
I love it.
I'll jump down a little bit further. Having autism is hard because not everyone can see how an autistic person might struggle and sometimes want to flee because their senses are on overload and they might be in pain, but they try their best to hide that pain time and time again. And when an autistic person is hiding all that stress, it can build up and up inside them, even though they try their best. This is called masking, and it's sometimes hard for us to see that a person with autism needs lots of help from friends like you and me. So if you know an autistic person, it's important, don't forget, that they might do things differently, but make sure that you don't let that stop you from understanding and letting other people know that autistic people are amazingly different, and aren't we all just so?
Oh, I get all tingly.
I get teary too.
I was like teary and tingly. It's so beautiful. Well, thank you so much, not just for sharing about video modelling, but sharing the lesson plans and the poem. I'll put that all on the blog and in my email so everyone listening can actually access that. And I really appreciate your time and your busy life to share with us amazing things. But that poem is just beautiful. I love it. I love it so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about my beautiful boy and the work that we do here at my school with the Hub. We'd love for you to come and visit one day, Sue, and give us your feedback.
Absolutely. Oh, no, I think I'd just come and want to stay and play.
And you've been a big inspiration in all of the work that we do here.
Oh, that's so kind. I really, really appreciate that. I just love seeing how, people are putting things in place to make a difference to our kids. And, I embrace difference to make a difference. Your school's definitely doing that. So it warms my heart. So
We sure are. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.
I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.suelarkey.com.au.